And so as we begin our discussion today on the Sacred Heart, we have with us an author who's going to talk about a book she wrote, I think it was a couple years ago. Her name is Costa, and she wrote this book called Healing Promises, an Essential Guide to the Sacred Heart. Anne, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you, Father. Thank you.
Now, like I said, one of those simple devotions every Catholic needs to integrate into their life is the devotion to the Sacred Heart. What drew you to write this book?
Well, because I became involved in a local apostolate here, which actually had far-reaching devotion all around the world called the Sacred Heart Apostolate, that was involved in helping families to enthrone Jesus in their homes. That was founded right here in my hometown of Syracuse, New York, and I got involved and really fell in love with the heart of Jesus. I knew Jesus. I had believed in his presence in the Eucharist, loved my Catholic faith, but when I started to really contemplate his heart and embrace this devotion, of which there are many facets, in a real practical way, it really changed my life, and I came to a much deeper understanding of how much Jesus loves us, and God the Father as well.
You know, in the majority of the countries in Europe and other parts of the world, the Feast of the Sacred Heart is a holy day of obligation. I mean, for instance, this Friday, if you're going to try to get anything from Rome or from the Vatican News Service, it won't be published because it's considered a holy day of obligation. Do you have any idea why it's not in this country, why the bishops don't make the Feast of the Sacred Heart a holy day of obligation?
I don't, but it would be a good idea to try to get that reinstated here because, again, it helps us to put aside, a part of this devotion is the First Friday devotions, right?
That's right.
That we will go to church and we'll contemplate making reparation to the heart of Jesus for the way that we've actually hurt him through the week or in our lives. And just as a society, you said we're a world that's lost its heart. Well, we've lost his heart. And this devotion helps us to put it right back front and center in our lives, and that would be one other beautiful way because it's definitely entrenched in our liturgical year, but to make it a holy day of obligation would be a beautiful gesture of love.
I mean, in our country, at least where I'm from in Cincinnati, it's never been a big deal. The Feast of the Sacred Heart, it just comes and goes. It's just another day of the weekend. As I said, there are parts of Europe, especially in Rome and in France, where the Sacred Heart is lifted up, and there's processions and there's great celebrations to remind us of God's love for us. It's strange. I mean, it's just a strange thing. Now, I'll get back to what we're talking about here. Of course, we know that the Sacred Heart of Jesus it's found its roots from the earliest days of the Church. But in this, I think it's the 17th century, Jesus revealed himself to a religious sister who encouraged her or ordered her to really bring about a very clear devotion to his Sacred Heart.
Yes, St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, a visitation nun in Paris-le-Monial, France. She had 4 major apparitions that means, Jesus appeared to her 4 times, although she had many inner dialogue with Christ all through her life. But he did in a special way reveal his heart. He showed her a heart, the image that we see, that we take for granted now, the idea of the flames, the cross, the wound, and the crown of thorns around his heart. He showed and revealed this heart to her and asked for devotion to it, not because he needs our love, but that knowing that we need his love. And it was at a time in the church when the church was teaching that God was very harsh. God as a father was very harsh and unapproachable with Jansenism. So it was at that time in our church where Jesus appeared and said, no, my heart is bleeding for you. My heart is on fire for you. And I love you, and please don't ignore me, basically was his message.
That's right. There was a group called, founded by Cornelius Janssen, and it was centered in a convent in Port Royal. I believe that was in France or in Belgium. And they took on almost a very Calvinistic view of Catholicism, and it was very, very harsh, very unbending, and very much focusing on an angry God. And I think, the Lord, just like his mother, whenever there's an error that's coming into the world, they want to stop it.
That's right. And he gave the image of his heart. He asked for it to be, honored and contemplated so that we could come to really understand. You said to live in his heart, and we are. We're called to live in the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and through it and for it. We're supposed to live for his heart, too, and the love of him. So everything that we need to know as Catholics is right contained in that beautiful image, really.
For Catholics, well, no, just Catholics, human beings here, when they see a heart, they tend to think of romantic love. Is the Sacred Heart really and when you read the writings of the French, especially John Eudes and Jean-Jacques Ollier and many of the writers in the 16th or 17th century, even Bossuet, they tend to always focus on, they almost sounds like romantic ideas of God's Sacred Heart. Is that a proper way, or is that just one part of the whole mystery?
Well, God's love is exacting, isn't it? It's full of justice. It's full of mercy also. And it's a heart that was suffering. So it's a heart that embraces the cross. And that's not always easy. It's not about being nice. No. We're not really called to, as Catholics, to be nice. We're supposed to be calling people to holiness, which can be a narrow road, and the heart really is our guide through that. His heart leads us down that path and gives us the strength, the courage, everything that flows, the mercy from his heart. He promised, and he made many promises, but it's encapsulated in 12 promises, what that heart really offers to us through this devotion.
Well, Anne, can you kind of give us a few of these 12 promises? Or if they're short enough, you can list all 12 if you like.
Well, yeah, I'll get started, and you can stop me if we're running out of time. But the first one is, I will give them, all of us, the graces that we need in our particular state in life. Graces flow from his heart. Graces are there because life can get really hard, and we need that help. Number 2, I will establish peace in their homes. Well, there's not a single home that I know of that doesn't need a little bit more peace, especially in our times. I will comfort them in all of their afflictions. I will be their refuge in life and especially in death. And I will abundantly bless their undertakings. So there's this ongoing sort of outpouring of assistance and grace that comes from his heart. Number 6 is, sinners will find in my heart the source and infinite ocean of mercy. Of course, this devotion came way before the Divine Mercy devotion that we're probably more familiar with. But they're sister devotions. Not one does not replace the other. They both simultaneously fulfill the role of the love of God in our lives today and what we need from him. Number 7 is, lukewarm souls will become fervent. So that lukewarmness that Christ warns us about, he's going to help us overcome that. And number 8 is, fervent souls will quickly mount to high perfection. And that certainly means that we want to be more loving. We want to be more obedient, because we know that in our obedience to Christ, our happiness will grow. We'll be more joyful. We'll be less anxious. And so he wants us to grow into that great grace that he wants to give to us from his heart. Number 9 is, I will place those places wherein, and this is the enthronement one, wherein the image of my Sacred Heart shall be exposed and honored. So that is when you saw your grandmother's house, and every Catholic, probably up until 1950, had a very prominent image of the Sacred Heart right there, front and center usually. And that's because they actually enthroned their home, made Jesus king of their home. There's an actual ceremony that goes on that's very beautiful, and families are doing that today.
Oh, I've enthroned several for families, and it really is, and it is such an important part to make. As one of the things I want to encourage people is to have their home become a place of God's grace, and to create a little chapel or oratory in their home. And there's nothing better than to center it around the Sacred Heart.
That's right. Number 10, I'll give to priests the power to touch the most hardened hearts. So who doesn't? Most priests really know how hardened people's hearts from sin and repetitive sin can be these days. People are looking for freedom.
As a priest, I'll tell you, it's like talking to a brick wall, you know. You go out there and you're a preacher. I swing for the fences when I preach, and I put it out there, and they, oh, nice homily, Father. Then you watch them go out, and they act the same way they did when they came in. So it's like, oh, well, bounced off again.
Well, that's right, but you know what? There's a lot of ways in which we can interact with people through Unbound and some beautiful ministries nowadays to help. I'd love to talk about that sometime. But and number 11, those who shall promote the devotion shall have their names written in my heart. So not only does Christ, we can promote his heart with others. We can share it. Whatever we experience of his love, we're called to share that with other people. And practically how it is that when we enthrone Jesus, how that changes our lives. And number 12 is the First Fridays. I promise you, and the excessive mercy of my heart, that my all-powerful love will grant to all those who receive Holy Communion on the first Fridays in 9 consecutive months the grace of the final perseverance, and that they shall not die in disgrace, nor without receiving their sacraments. My divine heart shall be their safe refuge in this last moment. And so, that's it. I mean, God's heart is with us every step of the way, right up until the end, and then he carries us off, hopefully we can go internally and love that heart forever.
Well, it's just like anything else. We need to tell that, we look in a world that's suffering from serious heart disease, clogged arteries because of sin and selfishness. And the only thing that can clean that out is the Sacred Heart. And, with the fire on the top of that image tells us what? That God purifies and God strengthens and our feebleness and our weak loves that we have sometimes, so that he can give us the strength.
Yes, it is the source of it. The source of strength and perseverance, perseverance in trying to do the right thing.
Well, Ann Costa, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing us this book. I haven't gotten it, but it looks like it's a very, very good book, and it is on my list. Matter of fact, it's on the way from Amazon right now. So thank you very much for sharing us with that book. And if people want to pick it up, where else can they find it?
Well, I'd like them to go to their local Catholic bookstore if they have one, Amazon, or the Franciscan Media site. It's a Franciscan book. It's put out by them.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful feast day this Friday.
Thank you, and you too, Father.